In 2021, I released a video where I tried beating Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door without using money. This restriction ended up making for a fun challenge. You can't buy items, so you can only use ones you find throughout the game, and since you can't use ins or anything, your healing options are limited. A while later, I did the same challenge in the first Paper Mario game, and people in the comments wanted me to do the same challenge in other Mario RPGs. So I started doing a no money run of Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, and it was just too easy. The game absolutely floods your inventory with items, and it wasn't really interesting or challenging at all. But I thought to myself, if the game is easy because of items, then what if I did a playthrough where the items are what's banned? In this video, I'm gonna find out and try beating Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga without using items. Here are the rules I went with. First, and most obviously, I can't use items at all. This includes all of the stuff from your inventory, mushrooms, nuts, and so on. This also includes beans. There's a cafe where you can use the beans you find to raise your stats, but that's not allowed. I'm allowed to have items in my inventory if I want, but I can't actually use them, so there wouldn't really be a point. Second, equipment like clothing and badges are allowed, with the exception of the mush badge. All variations of the mush badge increase your damage based on how many mushrooms you have in your inventory. Since the mushrooms would just be in my inventory, the mush badges technically don't violate the no item rule, but they're very overpowered, so I've banned them as well. Third, fleeing from battles is also banned. When you flee from battles, you drop coins, and since I am allowed to use money in this challenge, that's technically fine, but to make things more interesting, I decided to ban fleeing as well, since that was part of what made the interesting survival element in the Paper Mario challenges. With that out of the way, let's get started. The adventure began in the Mushroom Kingdom. Princess Peach's voice got stolen by Cackletta and her assistant Popple from the Bean Bean Kingdom, so after taking on the tutorial battles and getting my photo taken, I headed to the Bean Bean Kingdom to get it back. While I was on Bowser's airship, I got my first level ups. In this game, leveling up automatically boosts all of your stats a bit, but you also get to pick one to receive an extra boost. I decided to start by focusing on attack power for a while. HP and defense already got naturally buffed with each level up, so I thought it made sense to focus on attack power to start so I could try and finish battles as fast as possible, which would help me avoid taking damage to begin with. Something I should mention about level ups is that they do not heal you in this game. So unlike the Paper Mario games where I could try leveling up to get a heal, in this game that wasn't an option. Also, this game does not have any ins or recover blocks, so even though I could use money, I couldn't use it to heal. At this point in the game, the only way I could reliably heal was by defeating a boss. In the tutorial areas, some of the battles heal you, but that wasn't consistent. And of course, I couldn't use items to heal. So for quite a while, the only way for me to heal was to defeat a boss, since you are healed when you win a boss fight. This meant that I had to be very careful about what battles I got into. In the Stardust Fields, Bowser got stuck in a cannon. A creature named Tollstar said he'd free him if I collected 100 coins in the area and gave them to him, so I explored the fields. Along the way, I learned some funny moves for the bros. In battles, these are called bros attacks, and they're basically the special moves of this game. You have to spend BP to use them, but they deal a lot of damage. Since boss fights heal you when you win, I decided not to use bros attacks on regular enemies. By saving my BP for boss fights, I could get through them faster by spamming bros attacks, and then I'd get healed for winning. After getting the 100 coins I needed, I went back to Tollstar. He decided to fight me instead of doing what he said, which meant it was time for the first boss fight of the playthrough. I hadn't been perfect at guarding throughout the area, but the cutscenes had healed me, so I was able to enter Tollstar's battle completely healed. Tollstar himself was also quite easy, and using bros attacks I managed to take him down fairly easily, only taking damage one single time. After climbing the mountain a bit and reaching Hoo Hoo Village, I met the Hammerhead brothers, who offered to make hammers for me if I could get them the Hoo Hoo block from the top of the mountain. Since they didn't have other hammers I could take, I had no choice but to accept. I was a bit careless with dodging on the way up the mountain, so when I reached Huhuros, the mountain's first boss, my HP was rather low. But thankfully, the boss is very easy and I didn't get hit once. Climbing up the rest of the mountain, I thought I'd try to take on some enemies to gain some experience. I regretted this decision immediately because Mario got knocked down to just 4 HP. Luigi was still at full HP, but if I didn't play it safe in the next boss fight, then I knew I might have to do it with Luigi alone. At the top of the mountain, I had to fight Drago Ho-Ho. It defeated Mario immediately. When you have to dodge attacks and a character is defeated, the other one picks them up, which adds a delay to your button presses. So once Mario went down, it was even harder to keep Luigi alive. Also, since I couldn't use items, there was no way to revive someone when they went down. Defeated characters come back with 1 HP at the end of a battle, or with full HP if it was a boss battle, but during the fights themselves, a character going down meant there was no way to bring them back for the duration of the fight. I lost the battle pretty quickly and had to try again. However, I noticed that on some attempts, I got to go before the dragon did. This let me fire off a bros attack with Mario. Both characters need to be alive for bros attacks, so if Mario went down, Luigi couldn't use his. On most attempts, the dragon would still defeat Mario soon after. Even with the damage from his bros attack, the dragon still had plenty of HP left, so Luigi couldn't finish it alone easily. But eventually, I had an attempt where I managed to dodge enough attacks to keep Mario alive, and a few bros attacks was enough to win. The boss fights themselves hadn't been too difficult so far, but having low HP going into them was what caused problems, so I decided I'd try to avoid as many enemies as I could for the time being. After heading back to town and getting my hammers, I headed for the Bean Castle town. When I reached the castle itself, I got dropped into the sewers. I tried to avoid enemies, but the narrow paths made it tough. Eventually, I had a battle where Luigi got defeated, and Mario scraped by with just 1 HP, so I was clearly doing a fantastic job. This was a bit of a problem. Once you get out of the sewers, there's a boss, which would heal me if I beat it. However, the obvious problem is that I had to beat the boss. Since Mario and Luigi were both unable to take even a single hit and I had no way to heal them, that would be easier said than done. After making it out of the sewers, Cackletta stole the Bean Star, and then I had to fight Queen Bean, who was angry because she had worms. This is the boss fight I was talking about. On my first attempt, on my second attempt, I actually did pretty well. I dodged attack after attack and damaged her turn after turn, and I even completed a full phase of the fight without getting hit, but eventually I messed up, and of course, one single mistake meant it was back to the beginning. On that attempt, I had spammed bros attacks every turn, and ended up running out of BP. But how this fight works is, she starts with 2 big arms, and a main body with a crown. The crown counts as a spike, so you can't attack the main body until the arms are defeated, which makes the crown fall off. So from that attempt on, I decided to save my BP until I defeated the arms, so I'd always have BP for her main body. Dozens of attempts later, I started to get the timing for her attacks down better. Her most annoying attack was when she'd spit out beans. If I jumped too late, then the character would get defeated, but if I jumped too early, I'd land on the bean, which would send it back and turn it into an additional enemy, and then I had another enemy's attacks to worry about. After several attempts, I didn't think I had a real shot at winning, so instead I headed back down to the sewers. If I couldn't defeat the queen at my current strength, my only option was to carefully fight the enemies in the sewers to gain experience so I could level up. On my first level up, I tried raising HP to see if it would increase the HP I had by that amount, but it didn't. So I reset the game and continued focusing on power. Mario and Luigi both only had 1 HP, so defense didn't matter in this particular case. All I could do was try to end the queen fight faster by dealing more damage. So my strategy was basically to use the save point, win 1 battle, then run back to the save point and back again. Doing it like this was obviously quite tedious, but it guaranteed that I wouldn't lose my experience if I lost a fight. Also, when you choose the stat you want to boost during a level up, the amount it goes up by is decided by a random roll. By saving after every battle, it meant I could reset the game if I got a boost of 1, and would only have to do 1 battle to try again for a better roll. Doing this strategy, I managed to get both Mario and Luigi up to level 9. Unfortunately, the enemies didn't respawn, so it looked like that was what I was stuck with. So I headed back upstairs and started trying the fight again. As you might expect, it still wasn't easy. Mario and Luigi's higher attack power meant that I could defeat the arms more quickly, but I still couldn't make a single mistake on my dodges or it was over. I lost on several attempts, but I slowly got the hang of dodging her attacks more and more. And eventually, I got on a run where I managed to take out both arms, and then managed to jump over all of the beans she shot without turning any of them into enemies. With Mario and Luigi both still alive, I was able to start firing off bros attacks. With their higher attack power, I was able to deal way more damage than I did before, and after carefully dodging her attacks, I managed to take her out in a single cycle, with her crown never coming back. The Queen's assistant told me that the only cure for worms is cola, so I headed off on a quest to get some for her. Outside of the castle, I got a bean badge for Mario. Badges in this game don't work like the ones from Paper Mario. Instead, they're basically traditional RPG equipment. They increase your attack power and BP, and sometimes have additional effects. My next destination was the place where cola was made, but before that I headed into town. Obviously, the challenge I was doing was that I couldn't use items, and that meant that I had a ton of them on me that I hadn't used. I headed to the equipment shop, where I sold every item I'd picked up, which gave me plenty of money to use on equipment. After getting a badge for Luigi and new clothes for both characters, their stats were much better. I headed outside of town and got Luigi another level up since he was close, and then headed for my next destination. I soon made it to the Cola House, where I had to fight a thief named Popple and an epic Bowser OC. This fight is very easy. If you attack Popple, then Bowser gets mad and gets an extra attack, but if you just focus on Bowser, once he's defeated, Popple runs away. With Mario and Luigi both having high attack power, I was able to defeat Bowser very quickly, and ended up skipping the part where he breathes fire. And since Bowser was down, Popple ran away, giving me the win. After the brothers learned how to most effectively harm one another, I entered the woods. The enemies in there weren't super easy, and Mario actually got knocked down to just 7 HP before too long. There's a boss in the woods, and you have to do puzzles to get there, so it would be a little while. I had to make sure I didn't have a repeat of the castle, so I used a save point so I could reset the game if my HP got too low. The Great Deku Tree told me to find 3 fruits, and each one was at the end of a route accessible from the center area. One of the fruits is guarded by a mini-boss, so I decided to get that one first to get it out of the way. On my first attempt, I lost pretty miserably. The Wiggler's attacks did exactly 7 damage to Mario, which meant he couldn't take a hit from it. I decided to get the other fruits first, taking out the enemies for experience along the way, and then defeat the Wiggler last. I gained a few levels using this approach. After getting the other 2 fruits, I headed back to Wiggler. I thought this fight was pretty funny. I actually took a hit on both Mario and Luigi, but with the levels I'd gained in the other parts of the forest, Mario's defense meant he now only took 6 damage, so he survived with 1 HP. To beat Wiggler, you have to jump on the 4 segments once each, turning them from red to yellow, and then you can attack the head, which is the actual thing with HP. After changing the body from red to yellow, I attacked the head with the Chopper Bros attack, and I messed up the final input and still beat it in 1 hit. Mario was so powerful that just free-falling with his hammer in hand could crush his opponents. Unfortunately, despite having the boss music, for some reason Wiggler didn't count as a boss that heals you, so Mario was still at 1 HP when the battle ended. After handing over the fruits and watching a Seinfeld opening, I had to fight the Chuckleator. He starts with a shield, but after taking about 30 damage, it breaks and then you can attack the body. Dodging the attack where he sent out little waves was simple, but I found the ball attack almost impossible to dodge. The timing was very tight and I got hit almost every time. If he targeted Luigi it was okay, because he had the HP to take a few hits, but if he went for Mario it was basically a guaranteed loss. After losing several times, I decided to use a Bros attack on the shield as soon as the fight started, which broke it immediately. That meant Luigi could do a turn 1 Bros attack on the main body. Using this approach, I got closer than I had before, but I still lost. However, this seemed to be the best way to go. But I tried the fight over and over for almost an hour and I still couldn't do it. I figured that my best option was to level up some more, but I'd already defeated all of the enemies in the woods. When you get a game over after beating Queen Bean, you have the option to return to your last save, or return to Bean Bean Castle and retain your progress. I decided to return to the castle to see if it would make the enemies respawn. It didn't, but I was amazed to see that Mario and Luigi had both been completely healed. As it turned out, choosing to continue from your last save point didn't heal you, but if you chose to return to the castle then you did get healed. This presented an interesting option. I could fully heal if I got defeated and went back to the castle, but then I had to travel all the way back to where I was before, taking damage from enemies along the way. So it was a risk versus reward situation depending on how far I was from the castle, but at the very least, now I could be a little less paranoid about my every move. Now that I could actually afford to make mistakes here and there, I went back to the Chuckleator, and managed to take it down using the approach I had been using before. After getting banished to the Shadow Realm by the angry Cola executive, I had to do a short section as Luigi alone. I took on the enemies for the experience, and soon I made it back to the castle with Mario. Mario cured the Queen's worms with the power of his puke, and the Prince appeared to inform us that Cagletta had appeared in Woohoo University, which was my next destination. After buying a new badge in town, I headed there. The University is a fairly large dungeon with enemies. Now that I knew I had a way to heal up, I decided to fight the enemies I came across. I was dealing plenty of damage, and at this point my HP being low was the main issue, so I decided to start increasing it. Having more HP made fights less dangerous, obviously, and also meant that if I needed to warp back to Bean Bean Castle to heal, I'd have more HP to make it easier to get back to my actual destination from there in good condition. This strategy worked out quite well for me. The enemies in the University did quite a bit of damage, but the University itself is not that far from the castle, so getting back to it safely from there wasn't too difficult. After making it to the end of the dungeon, I fought Cagletta. I did a miserable job of dodging her attacks, but thanks to my max HP being higher, I was able to take her down with Bros attacks before my HP was completely gone. Mario and Luigi both took quite a lot of damage, and I would have lost if I hadn't been boosting HP with my recent level ups, but because I had been, I was able to take hits a bit better and win. After I beat her, Prince Peasley stabbed a man and then told me to pursue the Beanstar to the basement. Next up was a battle against Popple and Rookie in the University basement. Like the first time, I used the same strategy and it wasn't too difficult. Defeating Rookie makes Popple run away, so I focused on him. After the fight, the group grabbed onto the Beanstar as it flew into the sky, where it split into 4 pieces and scattered. Mario and Luigi landed in Oho Oasis. I wasn't sure if I could warp back to Bean Bean Castle from the Oho Oasis area, so I definitely wanted to avoid getting defeated here. I made my way through the area carefully, fighting enemies here and there, but avoiding many of them. Soon enough, I made it back above ground. Prince Peasley told me to head to Bean Bean Airport next to meet with Princess Peach. Eventually, I made it to the Hammerhead brothers' house, who had moved to this area since our last encounter. They reforged my hammers, upgrading them to the super hammers. Unfortunately, in this game, the hammer upgrades only affect what you can break on the overworld, so they aren't any stronger in battle. But they did at least look cooler in battle. After doing that, I headed for the airport. On the runway, Lady Lima asked me to take care of the piranha plant so Peach's plane could land. There are quite a few of them you can fight, but fortunately you actually don't need to fight them at all. By spraying them with Mario's water, and then electrocuting them as Luigi, they disappear permanently. Do that to all 5 plants, and the hammer-proof egg on the runway cracks, revealing the next boss. Since the castle was close to the airport, and I hadn't needed to fight the piranha plants on the runway, I entered the boss fight fully healed. The fight starts with the main boss, alongside 2 of the regular piranha plants. Like the Rookie and Popple battles, if you target the main boss, the smaller plants immediately counterattack. However, the counterattack is actually very easy to avoid. The part that's supposed to be tricky is that they shoot quickly, making it hard to tell who they're shooting at, but if you just jump with both Mario and Luigi at the same time, you can avoid their shots without much problem. Since the counterattacks were so easy to dodge, I decided to ignore that mechanic and just focus on the main boss, since the fight ends when it's defeated. What was harder to dodge was the main boss's attack. It came up and swung its arm across the screen, and you're supposed to jump with one bro then the other, but I kept messing up and taking damage with both of them. Also, even though the Piranha Plant counterattacks were fairly easy to dodge, sometimes my timing would be slightly off and I'd get hit with one character, and since I couldn't use items, I couldn't heal. So every time these attacks happened, my HP slowly fell. Fortunately, using Bro's attacks on the main boss, I managed to win after a few turns, but Mario and Luigi both took pretty decent damage. I wasn't really worried in this particular fight, but it suggested that things were starting to ramp up. Mario and Luigi both hit level 21 in this fight, and I decided to finally start boosting defense. They had pretty good HP and attack now, so this felt like the next priority, especially after how the last fight went. After the battle, Princess Peach's plane came in, where it was revealed that she had fooled Cackletta at the start of the game, and her voice had never been stolen. And next, she asked us to escort her to Little Fungi Town, where toads who immigrated from the Mushroom Kingdom live. Using the new hammers, I was able to break a rock to get to the desert that leads there. On the way to the town, we learned that Peach, if unsupervised for even a single second, will be immediately kidnapped. After doing a perfect job escorting her, I reached Little Fungi Town. But before I could enter the town, I had to fight the next boss, Trunkle. Since I had done such a perfect job in the desert, Mario only had 10 HP left when I entered the fight. Trunkle starts as a bigger monster, but once it takes a bit of damage, it splits into 4 smaller guys. Only one of the smaller guys is the main one. The other 3 will sink into the ground after you attack them once. Unfortunately, knowing how to fight him was not enough. On my first attempt, I got beat pretty quickly in the second phase. I had the option to go back to the castle and heal, but the issue was I didn't know if I'd have to redo that entire desert section with Peach. Also, even if I didn't have to redo the Peach escort mission, the location I was at was quite far from the castle, so I thought I would definitely take a lot of damage coming back. I decided that I would just have to get this fight done now. I did a little better on my second attempt, but still lost. I was just doing a bad job dodging his attacks. But finally, I had the golden attempt. In the first phase, I spammed Bro's attacks until he split up. Once he did, I used regular jumps and counterattacks on him until I found the real one, and then spammed more Bro's attacks. After the string of counterattacks I had done, I only needed 2 more to take him down. You might notice that Mario's HP went up during the fight. That's because in the first phase, Trunkle can breathe in, sucking in enemies and mushrooms from their surrounding area. If one of these mushrooms hits a character, they get healed for free without using an item. I thought that might be helpful, but then I actually didn't get hit again, so it didn't even matter. And with the boss defeated, Mario and Luigi were fully healed. After that, I took the lift into Little Fungi Town. After I bought some new equipment in town, Peach told Mario to channel his inner gamer, so I headed to the arcade and played the game.
It's great in the arcade. Whoa! It's coming right at me! It's right! It's right! Alright! I'm going in!
After getting the high score, Mario was rewarded with a disease, so Luigi had to go get the cure by himself. In the entire solo Luigi section, I only got into 1 battle, and Luigi's good stats and new equipment got me through safely. After dodging some fire, I got what I needed and headed back to Mario, where Cackletta revealed she'd possessed Bowser and kidnapped Peach. After I rescued Mario, Cackletta demanded that I collect the Bean Star pieces for her, so I set off to collect the 4 pieces. After buying some new equipment in the castle town, I headed back to the desert that Fungi Town was in for the first Bean Star piece. To get it, I entered the SS Chocola, and after being really good at puzzles and watching a guy get fat-shamed, I bombed the ship, which made the Bean Star piece float away. After chasing the Bean Star piece through the locked doors it somehow got through, I ended up in Guarhar Lagoon. There, I opened a warp pipe, which meant I could teleport back there from another pipe. This area was a decent distance from the castle, but this meant that if I got defeated, I could go back to the castle to fully heal up, and then warp back to the lagoon using the castle town's warp pipe. A crab named Hermie got the Bean Star piece, but before heading for him, I went to the massage place, where Mario and Luigi learned how to threaten each other. This also meant that I could now use their elemental Bros attacks. I tried to avoid enemies on my way to Hermie, but the narrow paths made that tough at points. However, I noticed something along the way. The equipment I had purchased for Luigi back in town had pushed his defense up quite a bit, and now there were plenty of attacks that only dealt 1 damage to him. So things were looking somewhat promising. However, because there were lots of enemies that were hard to dodge and I couldn't heal up, by the time I reached Hermie I already had countless game overs, and on the attempt where I did make it, Mario only had 1 HP and Luigi only had 8. The first few attempts went basically as well as you'd expect. With each try though, I got a little better at the timing for his attacks. When you attack the main body, he counterattacks with the claws, but if you defeat the claws, then all Hermie can do is use an easily dodgeable bubble attack. However, soon after this happens, he retreats into his shell, which heals him. To get him out, you need to use Mario's fire ability, which meant if Mario got defeated, then I basically lost. I made a bit of progress this way, but like with the Queen Bean fight earlier on, not being able to make even a single mistake was just too difficult. I decided to go back to the castle to heal, and hope that I could dodge the enemies on the way to Hermie better than I did the first time. As it turned out, it was actually less of an issue than I expected. On my first time through the area, I guess I had already defeated all of the hard to avoid ones, because I managed to make it back to Hermie without getting into another battle. I started by using Bros attacks on the claws, and once they were defeated, I used Bros attacks on Hermie himself. When he went into his shell, I used Mario's fire to bring him back out before he could heal, and then I would defeat the claws with Bros attacks again and repeat the process. But eventually, Mario actually ran out of BP and Hermie still wasn't down. However, the claws are vulnerable to Luigi's Thunder, so I saved Luigi's BP for Hermie himself, and started using Luigi's Thunder and Mario's Hammer for the claws. I noticed that Hermie seemed to be retreating faster. There were times where I'd defeat his claws, but then I wouldn't even get a chance to attack him because he'd immediately retreat before I could. So I decided to defeat just one claw, and then targeted him directly. This eventually worked and I took him out, and with that I successfully ruined Christmas to get the first Beanstar piece. My next destination was Chucklehuck Woods. This was an area from earlier in the game, so the enemies weren't scary, but now I could access a new part of the area. My first destination was the Winkle Coliseum, where I got another high score. This time, instead of a disease, Mario got a card. The card let me get past this guy, who was blocking the way to the next Beanstar piece. Before I could get it though, I had to do the next boss fight against Popple. Luigi's higher defense was really noticeable here. Mario got defeated pretty quickly because Popple stole his hammer and did the hammer attack turn 1, but I actually continued the fight for many turns after that with Luigi. I did eventually lose because I had such a bad start, but the fight felt very doable, and I won pretty easily on my second attempt. At this point in the game, it's probably pretty easy to see why I invested so heavily into attack power early on. The main difficulty in the challenge was that the fights were basically tests of endurance. Since I couldn't heal, every bit of damage I took was permanent for the remainder of the fight, so I could only take a very finite number of hits before I lost. Having a lot of attack power meant that I could finish fights more quickly than I could otherwise, which allowed me to cut off the damage before it could finish me off. With Popple defeated, I collected the second Beanstar piece. I headed back to the castle town and sold the items I'd picked up, and then headed off for my next destination. Like the previous Beanstar piece, the third one was located within a zone I'd already been to, so the enemies were very easy. I took a little bit of damage here and there when they'd catch up on the overworld and get a first strike, but it was really nothing concerning, and I soon made it to the Yoshi Theater, where the next Beanstar piece was. The theater owner was using the Beanstar piece to decorate the theater's sign, so to get it, I had to bring him the neon eggs to decorate the sign with instead. Getting most of these is fairly simple, and after handing them to the owner, I got the third Beanstar piece. The final Beanstar piece was held by Harhal. I just had to play a minigame where I made clothing designs until he paid me with the Beanstar piece, and with that I had collected them all. After I brought the pieces together and revived the Beanstar, Cackletta told us to deliver it to her at Joke's End, so Prince Peasley gave us a fake one to fool her with. My first stop on the way was the Hammerhead brothers' house. I had progressed far enough into the game that I could upgrade my hammers into the Ultra Hammers. After that, I headed to the Bean Bean surfing spot. By crushing Luigi's bones and then drowning him, I was able to surf to Joke's End. This place was a major step up. In previous areas like Oho Oasis, I said there were enemies that were hard to avoid, but here they felt borderline impossible to avoid. And unlike the ones I had been dealing with for the past while, these enemies were not easy. Some required specific moves to damage them, others had attacks that were hard to dodge, and all of them did big damage when they hit. However, there was a small silver lining. Because Joke's End is in the middle of nowhere, to make it easy to leave and come back, there's a warp pipe at the entrance. So when I got defeated, I was able to go back to the castle for the heal, and then teleport right back to Joke's End. You might think that this made Joke's End easy, but no, this mechanic was actually basically a necessity here. Since I couldn't heal myself at all otherwise, it would basically be impossible to get through it. I'm sure people like speedrunners who know the enemies better could probably swerve through them or dodge their attacks, but for me, I felt like I was getting swarmed in almost every single room. With enough patience and a bunch of game overs though, I eventually made progress. A significant portion of the third floor is done with Mario and Luigi separated. This was fine for puzzles, but for enemy encounters it was tough, since they were all solo fights. But after many game overs, I eventually reunited the brothers and climbed the rest of the way up, where I finally caught up to Jojora. She sat the brothers down and then brought out Chucklissa to fight them. This fight was pretty challenging. Jojora herself wasn't too difficult. When she'd approach with her attack, I could counter with the hammer, which knocked her wand away. She runs away to get it, which gave me several turns alone with Chucklissa. The bigger problem was Chucklissa herself. She could poison my characters, which meant that they would lose HP on every single turn on top of the damage I took from any attacks I didn't dodge. Since I couldn't use items, I couldn't cure the poison myself, so getting poisoned meant I just had to accept tons of extra damage until it wore off. Her other attacks weren't too hard to dodge, but I couldn't dodge them with 100% consistency either. The poison damage combined with her attack damage made things tricky, and I eventually lost. On my second attempt, I still didn't do too well at dodging, but with better timing on my bros attacks and making sure not to attack Chucklissa when Jajora was there, I managed to take her down. In the next room, Popple took the real Beanstar, but then Luigi played a good game of Among Us and managed to take it back. He fell into the desert, and now I had to get him back using only Mario. Fortunately, avoiding fights in this area was very easy, a nice change of pace after how annoying Joke's End had been. After rescuing Luigi, I had to do the final fight against Popple, who had replaced Bowser as his rookie with Birdo. This fight was kind of nerve-wracking. For the first part of the fight, I focused on Birdo. Just like when Bowser was his rookie, Popple runs away when Birdo is defeated. Birdo's attacks weren't too hard to dodge, but Popple had all of his powerful attacks from last time, on top of new ones. Eventually, Birdo's HP got low enough to start the second phase of the fight. Birdo eats Popple, then spits out 4 eggs. You have to break all of the eggs, and then Popple eventually comes out, which lets you focus back on Birdo. This phase wasn't too hard, except that the eggs that didn't contain Popple contained Bob-Ombs. I was able to dodge most of them, but Mario got hit by one, which made him dizzy and unable to act for a while, which meant he couldn't dodge attacks. I finished the second phase, but in the final phase Mario took a hit and got knocked down to 1 HP. I managed to take down Birdo, which meant Popple would run away, but not before he did his final attack, which defeated Luigi. I won the battle with Luigi dead and Mario at 1 HP. The difficulty was definitely starting to ramp up a bit. I'd come into the fight with full HP, so you can see how even with the ability to heal at the castle, the fights themselves were becoming a lot harder since I couldn't heal during them. After winning the fight, I headed back to town. I went to the shop and picked up some new equipment and badges, which increased my HP, defense, and attack power by quite a bit. Most notably, I got the tank badge for both Mario and Luigi. This makes it so that regular jump attacks heal them a bit. At the castle, I learned that Bowser's castle was doing an aerial attack on the kingdom. So I headed back to Hoo Hoo Village and flew to the castle with Bloblonodon, and with that, I entered the game's final dungeon. Bowletta sent the Koopalings out to guard the castle, so I had to fight my way through each of them to get to her at the end. Iggy was the first Koopaling I had to fight. I got hit once at the start, and that was it. I blocked every other attack, and destroyed him quickly. It was very easy. Also, each Koopaling counts as a boss, which meant that beating them healed me. After a number of attempts, I managed to get through the next area safely, and got to the next Koopaling, Morton. This fight was a little more challenging than Iggy's. Morton had the same fireball attack Iggy did, which was very easy to counter, but he also had a shockwave attack I did a terrible job at dodging, which did a ton of hits in a row for a huge amount of damage. Using Bros attacks, I was able to take him out in time, but it was a much closer fight than Iggy's. My decision to start boosting attack power again seemed to be helping out here. Morton did huge damage and I couldn't heal, so getting through the fight as fast as possible was my #1 concern. Lemmy was next. Lemmy starts the fight with 3 imposters, and you have to hit them until you find the real one. I decided to approach this by doing regular jumps until I found Lemmy. Since the fakes are intentionally made weak, jumping on them with the tank badge equipped meant I got a decent heal every time. Once I found Lemmy, I used Bros attacks until he divided again, and then repeated. When Lemmy was alone, he only used the fireball attack the previous 2 had used, which was just as simple to counter as before, so this fight was even easier than Iggy's. Ludwig was up next. Before I could fight him though, I had to complete this little dodging minigame, and I actually had more trouble with this than I had with some of the actual fights. But after several minutes, I eventually succeeded. The fight itself was rather tough as well. He uses an attack very similar to the minigame, and I wasn't any better at dodging it, so I took tons of damage when he used it. Since I couldn't heal, the second time he used it, my HP got very low, and if he had used it a third time, I almost definitely would have lost. Thankfully, I managed to defeat him before he could. Next up was Roy, and for the first time, I actually lost one of the Koopaling fights. He had the shockwave attack Morton had, and the shell attack Ludwig had, which were the 2 attacks I had the most trouble dodging. So Roy obliterated me pretty quickly. On my second attempt, I used the same strategy. I spammed Bros attacks and I tried to dodge. I still didn't do too well at dodging, and Mario got defeated. But as luck would have it, the Bros attacks I had done before Mario got defeated had gotten Roy's HP so low that a final regular jump from Luigi was able to defeat him. Next up was Wendy. After swerving past a Magic Koopa with very smooth moves, I headed for the final Koopaling, Larry. This one wasn't too hard either. He did the fireball attack the other Koopalings also had, except that when you hit it back, he shoots it back again and you do a little rally. But even when I messed up, it really didn't do that much damage. So although it took a tiny bit longer because he had more HP, I was able to take him down quickly as well. And with that, the Koopalings were done. Soon I reached the end of the castle, where Popple was waiting for me. He starts the battle in his little machine, and he's invincible when he's inside. To get him out, I just used regular jump attacks on it for a few turns, and then when he jumped out, I used bros attacks on him. After a few turns he goes back in, and then I just repeated the process. His attacks were tricky to dodge, and I ended up taking quite a bit of damage, but with the HP I had it wasn't too bad at first. Towards the end of the fight though, Luigi ended up dying. Since that meant I could no longer use bros attacks, I started using regular jump attacks with Mario. Fortunately for me, I had already done enough damage that I was able to finish him off with just 2 jumps, and so Popple was defeated. Next up was Bowletta. This fight was fairly easy. Most of the attacks were quite easy to dodge, and there was no strange mechanic like Popple's tank. I could just attack head on. I wasn't too worried about taking damage either, because it didn't matter at all. Why? Because after I defeated Bowletta, she tricked the bros into lowering their guard so she could use a Bob-omb on them, before sucking them up. Because of the Bob-omb, when the final fight starts, Mario and Luigi are both at 1 HP. There's nothing you can do about this. You will always start this phase with 1 HP, and of course, other than the tiny heals I could get from certain equipment, since I couldn't use items there was no way to heal this. So I had to win this fight starting from 1 HP. This went about as well as you'd expect at first. She was faster than me, so she always opened the fight with several attacks before I even had the chance to move. Cackletta has 2 arms and a head, and once you defeat each of them, her heart appears, and remains exposed for a few turns. The heart is the part you have to damage, so when it was exposed, I focused on it. Once Cackletta's initial wave of attacks finished, I got to go a few times in a row, and because of my attack power, I was usually able to defeat both arms and the head within the handful of attacks I got. However, once the heart appears, it revives the other parts, and then I immediately had to start dodging attacks again. Doing all of this at 1 HP was pretty difficult. I made attempt after attempt, but even after all my trying, I had never actually managed to deal damage to the heart, which was the actual thing I was trying to damage. I eventually came to the conclusion that I couldn't beat this yet, so on my next defeat I returned to Bean Bean Castle. My goal now was to level up and boost power with every level. I needed to be able to destroy her quickly before she could start dealing major damage, and to do that, I needed my attack power to be higher. At level 38, I decided to try again. This time I used a different approach. When the heart wasn't exposed, instead of using bros attacks, I used regular jumps on the arms and the head. Since I had the tank badge equipped on both characters, doing this meant I could actually heal up. When the heart was exposed, I used bros attacks on it until it disappeared again. Doing it this way meant that I could actually afford to make mistakes in my dodging, and I found the head's attacks fairly easy to dodge, which meant if I defeated the arms first, I wasn't in danger of taking too much damage. But I kept trying it over and over and I still couldn't manage it. On another attempt, instead of using bros attacks when the heart was exposed, I decided to use regular jump attacks exclusively throughout the whole fight, even when the heart was visible. At this point, Mario's jump did about 50 damage, and Luigi's did about 40 damage. The tank badge basically removes the last digit of your damage and heals you for that much. So Mario got healed for 5 with every non-critical attack, and Luigi got healed for 4. As you might expect, doing it this way was slow, but it seemed to be working. But once Cackletta's HP got low enough, she started doing harder versions of her attacks, and in just 2 turns I got completely destroyed. On my next attempt I used the same strategy again, but once the harder attacks started coming out, I used bros attacks on the heart. But I lost again, so I decided to level up some more. Like I mentioned, Mario and Luigi heal based on how much damage they deal. So by raising their attack power, I would not only be able to deal damage faster, but I would also be able to heal for even more. I went up 5 more levels to reach level 43, and then decided to give the fight another try. The level ups helped a bit, but not in a massive way. Mario now dealt damage in the 60s, so every regular jump healed him for 6, but Luigi's power boosts had only gotten his jumps to do 49, so even though he was dealing more damage than he was before, he was still healing for only 4 HP per attack. I lost a few times, so I decided to change my approach. Instead of using jump attacks every turn, I used them when the heart was not exposed, but I went back to using bros attacks on the heart when it was exposed. And finally, after a ton of grinding and a ton of attempts, with this method I was able to take Cackletta down. With the higher attack power both characters had, my bros attacks did more damage than they had before, so I was able to smash through the heart's HP faster. It still wasn't easy, and I lost several times, but using this strategy I was eventually able to beat her at long last. And with that, the adventure was over. You can indeed beat Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga without ever using items. Although there were several challenging sections, this definitely wasn't the most difficult challenge ever. But I don't think that's a bad thing. I think challenges that add a fun twist to gameplay are a lot better than ones that are so blisteringly difficult that they stop being fun. This one required me to use strategies I wouldn't have had to in a regular playthrough, so if you're a fan of the game, I'd recommend giving it a try. I hope you enjoyed, and thanks for watching.
Get Pepsi Man Big Bottle Cap!